Outside of Washington and New York, New Jersey, and Virginia, to be exact, three political races could end up being critical for both the president and the Republican Party. Here for the AM Breakdown this morning, columnist for TheWeek.com and former speechwriter for President Bush, David Frum, and syndicated columnist David Sirota, who joins us this morning from Denver. So let's start off. David Sirota, let's ask you, is the state of Virginia lost? Bob McDonnell leads Cray Deeds by double digits, according to some polls, and in every off-year election since 1977, whoever wins the White House, it's the opposite party that takes the governorship. So is it all over but the crying there for the Democrats in Virginia?
Well, it looks pretty bad for Democrats in Virginia, but I don't think it's a national referendum on the Democrats in the sense that Virginia is a Republican state. It's been a Republican, red-leaning state for a long time. The Democrats have been able to pick off a couple of elections there, and the pendulum was bound to swing back. So, yeah, I think the Democrats are probably going to lose that race, but again, I don't think it's a referendum on the National Democratic Party. And I'll acknowledge the National Democratic Party does have some problems.
Yeah, well, what about that, David Frum? 5 of the last 7 governors in the Commonwealth of Virginia have been Democrats, but is it anything unusual this year if this continues this year, the historic trend that it's the other party that wins the governorship compared to the one that's in the White House?
I think the spinning has begun. Look, the whole story of Virginia, the thing that everyone has been talking about for the past couple of years in studying that state, is how a state that once was solidly Republican has become a swing state. It's a truly competitive state. And with the growth of the population in Northern Virginia, especially a highly educated, Democratic-leaning electorate. So Virginia has become very decisive. So if I think when you look at what is going to happen there, the interesting question is why. If the Republicans are going to take back the state, it looks like it will be because of a collapse in voter enthusiasm among Democrats, and especially minority Democrats. And that, while the state therefore it's not a net referendum on the National Democratic Party, it is a bellwether of what is going on with Democrats and the disenchantment of the more left-wing part of the party with the president and the smallness of the moderate part of the party that you might think would rally to him.
David Sirota, what about the state of New Jersey? An unusually tight race for Governor John Corzine. He's got 2 challengers, Chris Christie and Chris Daggett. Daggett, the independent, somewhat affecting the numbers there for Christie. But is New Jersey a referendum on the president?
Yeah, you know, I agree with David in the sense that he's right, that if there is a problem for the Democratic Party right now, it's that the progressive base is a little bit less enthusiastic with the president and with the Congress right now, waiting to see if they're going to actually do things. As it plays out in New Jersey, look, I think the fact, frankly, that the Democrats are even in this race, you've got John Corzine, who was a former Goldman Sachs CEO running in the shadow of a Wall Street meltdown. The fact that the Democrats are even in this race under those circumstances, with an independent in the race, I think suggests that while the Democrats, again, have problems, that the Republicans are incredibly, incredibly weak. Remember, New Jersey is not as democratic a state as people think of it. It has had a Republican governor in recent years. It has been a state that John Kerry only won 52% of the vote. So it's a democratic state, but it's not as democratic as people put it out there.
What do you think about that, David? Is New Jersey weak for Republicans, or is it the addition of Chris Daggett to the competition that is pulling numbers from Christie and making him seem weaker than he actually might be if it were a head-to-head race?
Look, by all rights, this should be an easy Republican pickup. New Jersey is a very badly governed state. John Corzine has been a very bad governor. I think part of the problem is that the Republicans have the wrong man. Chris Daggett, who has been a lifelong Republican, I think a lot of people who've been following politics in that state would say he would be an outstanding choice, probably the best man for the job. There's something dysfunctional in the Republican primary process where Daggett didn't enter the Republican primary knowing he would lose, knowing there was a sore loser statute, and so ran as an independent. And Chris Christie has not offered a lot. I think if Daggett had been the head of the Republican ticket, this would have been a walk-away Republican race, and New Jersey would get some better government by someone who would be presiding over an administration full of very dubious characters. Speaking of John Corzine has done.
Speaking of the wrong person, David Frum, at the top of the ticket, New York's 23rd congressional district, right up there, way upstate New York, just below the Canadian border. Didi Scozafavo was the Republican choice. She was the Republican nominee. She was running against Bill Owens on the Democratic side, but the conservative wing of the Republican Party took aim at her. Sarah Palin. Tim Pawlenty came out and said she is too liberal to be the congresswoman from the 23rd district. They threw their support behind Doug Hoffman, basically ran her off the ticket. Is it wise to divide the party like that at this time?
Well, look, she has self-sacrificingly taken herself out of the race. And so the Republican and the conservative vote will be undivided, and that makes this a competitive district. But it's a fratricidal situation. Again, this should be a Republican walkaway. I mean, when you consider how bad conditions are in this country, why is this race so close? Why isn't there a 15-point Republican advantage in the district that is the home of Fort Drum?
And David Sirota, the fact that Skozafava has now thrown her support behind Bill Owens, does that give the Democrat a bit of a better chance to say that anybody who was a moderate who might have voted for the Republican may, in fact, swing their vote to the Democratic side because Hoffman is such a conservative?
Yeah, I think this is going to be fairly close. But the fact, again, that it is going to be fairly close is amazing. Remember, this is a district that has been Republican since 1871. The fact that the Democrat is in this maybe suggests a strength for the Democrat, but again, I think, I agree with David, it suggests a fundamental weakness among the Republican Party here. You're going to hear the Republicans, if they win these races, say, hey, look how strong we are. The fact, again, that the Democrats have been able to contend suggests a fundamental weakness of the Republican Party.
Yeah. And David Frum just finishes off here. David Plouffe, who was President Obama's campaign manager, said this really sends a signal to moderates in the Republican Party that they need not apply. Do you agree with that?
No, I think actually it's going to send a big signal that the moderates are desperately needed in the Republican Party. I think it's also going to send a signal about what is going on in the president's coalition, that he's going to have a mutiny on his left if he's not careful, but if he's his left, he'll have a mutiny in the rest of the country because what his left wants is so unacceptable probably to 80% of Americans.
David Frum, David Sirota, it was great to catch up with you. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
All right.